everyone, my name is Melissa Houghton and I am a senior consultant at Telstra Purple based in Melbourne, Australia. I'd like to start by thanking everyone for coming to my talk today, and a big shout out and thank you to all of the AngularUP conference organizers, and a big thanks for having me on. So my talk today is Easy, Breezy, Beautiful Angular Material. My socials are up on the screen if you did want to connect with me. I'm based on the other side of the world, but I'm still always happy to connect over Twitter or LinkedIn with any other developers, especially those who have similar interests like Angular and hopefully Angular Material. So I was born and raised in California and went to university there as well. And I enjoy beautiful things like the sunset over the Golden Gate Bridge. And working as a front-end developer allows me to make websites beautiful. I started working with the front end in one of my very first jobs while I was studying university. At the time working with AngularJS, because that's all that was around at the time. But I instantly fell in love with the front end, and I've consistently worked with the front end throughout my career and have consistently worked with Angular and the different versions of Angular, staying up to the current version that we're on now. But I'm not a UX designer, and I have not been trained in UX design. I'm a developer. So sometimes I need tools to help me make these websites look beautiful. And that's where Angular Material comes in. So Angular Material is really a combination of Angular and material design. So as this is an Angular conference, you're probably familiar with it. It's a TypeScript open source application framework and one of the most popular frameworks for the front end behind React and Vue at the moment. And in this talk, I'm not going to go into the details of how the Angular side of things work. I'm going to more focus on the Angular Material library itself. But the other side of that is the material design. And material design is actually a design language that's inspired by the physical world and all of its textures. So things like shadows and paper, it's designed to look like that. And really, it's a set of rules and guidelines for user interface design. So both Angular and material design are owned and developed by Google. And Google, being the brilliant big tech giant that it is, had the idea to combine the two of these and create Angular Material. So Angular Material is a UI component library that implements material design in Angular. And it is made by Angular for Angular. So that means it's well maintained, it's well documented, and it's really easy to use in your Angular applications. So in this talk, I want to cover the basic use of how to get started in Angular Material. I'm going to talk about how you can customize it to meet your brands. And we'll also take a look at some of the pros and cons and a comparison to other frameworks out there. But first, I want to tell you a story. So I used to work for a bank where the brand colors were orange and white. And we had this monolithic legacy online banking application that was one of the most visited platforms by our customers, and it used these colors heavily. So if you've done any accessibility training, you might notice that these colors, and these shades especially, are not very accessible. So to help with this, the brand team decided to change the color to a darker shade of orange. But the problem was that this monolithic legacy application had a crazy mess of CSS styling, and it was spread across several repositories. And changing the shade of orange to a darker one took over 6 months. And I know that now, over 2 years later, there's actually at least one place where that old shade of orange still exists. So later on, the design team created a brand new design system, design language, with all the different accessible colors and full guidelines to be rolled out across the public-facing sites. And a component library was created to help with this rollout. But unfortunately, the component library was focused around the public website, which was using Adobe Experience Manager. And it wasn't compatible with Angular, which is what we're using in other areas of the bank. So what did this mean for the online banking application? Well, luckily, the Orange Bank was in the process of rewriting its monolithic application into microservices using Angular and .NET. And they wanted all of these brand new Angular apps to look and feel the same using this new design system, but they wanted them to be built fast. But unfortunately, because the design components were not created for Angular, what was happening was the developers really just hacking and retrofitting into place what they could to make it work with their Angular application. And I joined the team and decided this just was not good enough. We were creating tech debt as we were trying to create this new architecture that was supposed to be helping and reduce tech debt. And with this new way of doing things, it meant that it would still be 6 months to change to a different shade of orange. And there were plans in place to extend the component library, but we really didn't have the time or the budget to do it at the moment. And they wanted these Angular apps to be built now. So how did we solve this problem? Well, I discovered that the new internal design language was actually based on material design, and there was many similarities between the two languages. And that's when I came across Angular Material. It was perfect. It would allow us to quickly develop our Angular applications, and the component library was already pretty well established and had good documentation. And it was made specifically for Angular, but libraries for material design and other frameworks and languages existed as well, so that if we wanted to apply the same concepts to, say, our Angular mobile applications, we could easily do so. So one of the very first apps that we were looking at rewriting was the password reset form. So I quickly created this password reset form using Angular Material components, really just taking examples from the documentation just to see what it would look like. And the background Angular functionality and API calls were all still done in the same way, but the layout and styling was much simplified. This screenshot is just put together using one of their built-in themes, but it's looking nice already without us really doing too much work. This was really quick to put together, and it already has a really nice look and feel. But the Orange Bank still wanted it to, look like the Orange Bank. And this could be achieved using an Angular Material theme. So I spent a few days experimenting with Angular Material custom themes to create this Orange Bank theme. And after proving that Angular Material would allow us to increase productivity while still reflecting our brand, we implemented Angular Material across all the brand new Angular apps that we were building. And when the Orange Bank theme was applied to the password reset form, it looked like this. And this is actually a screenshot from the password reset flow in production using the Angular Material theme. I did have to write a whole bunch of Sass to get it to look like this, using the SESS syntax, which is a CSS preprocessor, which allows you to use variables and mixins and functions, and that's what Angular Material uses as well. So I really had to practice my styling skills. And I wanted to ensure that all of this hard work I had put in to create this customization could be reused across other applications. A lot of our other apps had a very similar format with a form and, the 1, 2, 3 steps and buttons and all that. So we focused on reusability, and we put the theme in a place where it was centrally managed by us developers and developed alongside the designers to ensure that we were following the correct specs and having that brand consistency. It was then deployed as an internal NPM package that we referenced in each app. So here's 3 examples, again, live from production, where the Angular Material theme was being used. And this could also be achieved using a CDN or any sort of central place. The important thing is that all of your apps reference the same place, and it only needs to be updated once. So if the brand team decide to change to a different shade of orange or maybe a completely different color altogether, you only have to do so once and then just provide the updated package across all of your apps. So this was a very extreme case of how to use Angular Material in, say, a big organization where brand is important and you may have several applications. But what about for your personal website or maybe a small little side project? It can be really great for that too. It is quick and easy to use and has a few built-in themes, so you don't have to bother with that complex styling if you don't want to. So let's take a look at how you can get started. First, all you really need is these two commands. It's just the ng-new to create a new Angular app, and then immediately afterwards you can run ng-add Angular material, and it'll add in the basics of what you need for Angular material for you. So I have done that on one of my projects, and this is just the diff where I ran that. So here I added in one of the pre-built themes, so it'll ask you if you want to use one of their pre-built themes. So I chose this pink, blue, gray one. It then adds in the Angular CDK itself and the Angular material. And it asks if you want to use the animation module, and I said yes, so I added that in here. And then it'll ask if you want to use the typography, which is their fonts and their icons. And again, I said yes, so I added in the reference to the font package and the material icon pack itself, as well as adding in this class to apply the styles for the typography across your application. And then just added in some basic styles here as well. So the next step, I have created another app, just a simple hello world for us to get started. So all I have here is a basic container, so it's not sort of squished in the corner. There's no built-in flex layout to Angular material, so I'm just using a little bit of CSS Flexbox, but a lot of people also use the Angular flex layout package to create the fully flexible layout. But the individual components themselves are responsive. So it's already applied that typography because I ran the command and it said yes. And the other thing I've added in here is this material module. So here I am importing every single material component from the Angular material package itself, sort of bundling them all up into this one module, which I am then referencing in my app itself. So we have to do this so that your app knows the components itself and it gets that information. I've here imported all of them, which is good for demos and just learning. But if you're going to deploy this app to production, it's generally recommended to trim it down to just the ones you need because it does really increase your bundle size. So let's add in, so the one we chose, the pre-built theme that we chose actually has a dark background, but it hasn't been applied yet. So let's just add in this class, mat app background. We'll save that and it'll automatically reload and apply that background. So we're starting to see things looking a little bit nicer, but let's add in, we don't actually have any material components themselves yet, just some of the styles coming in. So I'm just going to jump over directly to the Angular material docs. I find them to be really good, and the docs are actually written in Angular material themselves, so you can see a real live working example of what it might look like. So they have a whole bunch of information on guides and all that, but if we jump over to components, they have detailed information on all the components. I'm going to go over to form fields because I feel everyone loves a good form. And here they have the overview of how the different components work, different types of form fields you can have, API, which tells you information on error handling and how you can combine that with your app. But they also have some really good examples. And when you jump over to the examples, there's this little button here to view code. And we can just copy that over and put it directly into our app here. So I'm going to do that and save. And that'll reload here. But if we take a look at what we just copied, we can see here we have a whole bunch of form fields. So behind the scenes, these are just using Angular components and attribute directives that you probably have already used if you've built an Angular application before. So this is really just referencing the material form fields component, and it has some inputs for the appearance. So we see there's different appearances here for standard, fill, and outline, and that corresponds to these slightly different appearances that we see in our browser. And see, we have this pink theme coming in. So that's again from the pre-built theme that I chose, is that pink sort of blue-gray color. So that's all coming in without me having to do any additional styling. If we look at the matte input, this is an attribute directive here that's just allowing your normal input field to work alongside the matte form field. And then in say like our matte icon, so this is taking the icon from that material icon pack that we included with our typography, and all you need to do is include the name of the icon itself, and there's a really good library of different icons available for you to use. So let's add in another piece of material components. So I just want to add in a toolbar. Again, I'm just going to copy and paste this over. So toolbar is that sort of header bit, and we have this class, this matte elevation class, which is actually going to provide that bit of shading, shadowing that is part of that material design. You can change this number to be something else if you want it to be more three-dimensional, or if you don't like that sort of 3D shading look at all, you can turn it into 0 and remove it. It also takes in this property of color. The themes are really composed of 3 main colors. The first is primary, which is obviously the primary color. Second is accent, and the third is warn, which is your warnings. It's generally used for more of your error handling and all that. So the main 2 are primary and accent. So I can change this here to accent and save it, and it'll go into this sort of blue-gray color that was part of our theme pack. I'm going to change it back to primary because I like that pink color that we have. And I also want to just copy in a whole bunch more material components so that we can see what they look like. So I'm copying these just from a pre-built file that I had before, but again, they're almost directly just taken from the docs. So we have things like radio groups and radio buttons. It supports ARIA labels for accessibility. And then there's different types of buttons that again have attribute directives to show what they're going to look like. So these raised buttons, accent, basic strokes, all that. When you click on items, they often have this sort of ripple effect, which is part of that material design. And the colors in our themes actually take in a palette, so a range of colors to allow for that ripple effect to happen. You know, there's date pickers, there's tooltips, there's all kinds of cool stuff. And all of this stuff is in there without me adding in any additional styles. It's all looking really good. So if we didn't want to do any sort of styling, we can just sort of put these all in and have a really nice looking application. But say we did want to be a bit more like Orange Bank and customize it to match our brand. Well, we can do that through a custom theme. So I have, again, for us prepared a custom theme that I'm going to just copy over so that we can see what that looks like. I'm going to copy and paste. There you go. Okay, cool. So I copied over a custom theme. So we will scroll up to the top and I will take a look at that in a second. But first what I'm going to do is, when we are looking at the changes that Angular Material does, it imports the style into our Angular build definition using the pre-built theme. So I'm just going to change this here to the custom one. If you set it up to a custom theme, it'll ask for the path and put it in here. So I'm going to change that to the one that I just copied in. You can, and I'm going to restart the server so that it will load that. You can do this at runtime, and then, which is really cool because then you can bind it to like a button or a toggle and actually load different themes for your users based on, you know, what works best for them. So while it's building, let's take a look at this theme. So first we're importing Angular Material Theming, which is really the main package that exposes all the different variables and mixins and functions that you need to create your custom theme. If you include Matte Core, that will apply all of the base styles. So anything you haven't defined yourself, it'll apply it here for you. And then when we want to define our our actual theme itself. As I said, it's really based around colors. The other piece of themes is typography. But first, looking at the colors, we're defining just these variables using the matte palette mixing that's provided by Angular material itself. And so this is creating a palette to create the ripple effect, like I mentioned. So we have the primary, accent, and worn. And then I'm just creating other variables here to use later on. So first we have the matte theme background. So here my theme is now loaded, and my overall background you can see is this sort of darker blue color, and I'm setting that here. And then you can even change things here. So this is so for all different kinds of components. So the card, I set it to a different shade of blue, and we can see that's a different shade of blue here. So at the moment, like our tooltip, when we hover over, it's this dark blue, but we can go here, sort of make it a red and save that, and that'll rebuild and then automatically make it a red. We'll hover over it once it pops up. Oh, there you go. So there you go. So now it's red. So this is just a function that's been defined by Angular material itself to be able to define these colors. And then they have one for the foreground as well, for like the icon color and all of that. But really, to apply the overall main theme to the components, you have to create a map theme object and include it into the Angular material theme. And that's using your primary, accent, and warning colors, like I said. So the second part of the custom theme is the typography. So typography is really all about your fonts and your font styles. This is just taken from the documentation of all of the different options that are available. So what I've done here is I have said for my different headings, I want to use this other font. So you can see here it's using that font. You can also change the sizes, the font weight, all of that. And then you just include the Angular material typography with your custom configuration. You can also define the typography or the colors on a component level basis. So here I'm doing it for the card. So you can see I've defined the headings, which is this headline, to be using just the basic Roboto font. So that's why this font here is different to our headlines up there. And you can also, just use wrap it in its own class to apply a theme on a class level basis as well. So there's different ways you can apply the themes. So these are really just the basics of how the themes work. If you want to jump into more details to create a custom theme like I did for the orange bank, to change things, more like the rounded borders, or really get into depth of, how big the button is and all that, you're going to have to be pretty complex with your styling. I found it useful to actually dig into the material code itself. So within Angular component source material, it's all open source, so you can see how they've implemented it. If we go into a card, for example, and you go into the card theme, we can see what they've created for that. So specifically for the card typography, I can see that for the title, they're using the information from the headline. So that's how I knew that I needed to define my new styles within the headline. And similar for title is used for the title and body one. So out of all of these in the overall config, they've only used these three. So I only used those three as well. So if we go back to our slides, we'll talk a little bit more about the pros and cons. Oops. So the pros, it's, as I mentioned, made by Angular for Angular. So it works really nicely with your Angular app. They do updates to Angular material at the same time that they're doing updates for Angular. So in version 9, they released a brand new test harness for the Angular material components. It's really good. And I've heard in version 11, it's now available for every single component. So it's a full package there now. And it's open source, so you can do things like I was just doing, as jumping into the documentation to see what's really happening behind the scenes to help you understand what's going on. Some of the cons are, to do that advanced custom theming, the documentation doesn't really go into much detail past those colors and styling. So it can be hard to fully customize if you're looking to do more than that. As I said, jumping into the code can help you in that way, but you do have to write a lot of styles. So if your app is, or your brand is kind of pretty different from material design and you're finding yourself getting really in depth with those customizations, I'd say it's probably better to use something else. But if you like that material design look, I definitely say go ahead and use this. But it does couple your application. So if you think you're gonna later on change to a different component library, probably best to maybe wait until you can do that, because as you saw, all of the tags and all that are very writing in the Angular material components and attribute directives, and then once you start using the APIs and all that, it can really be integrated into your code. And there's no built-in flex layout. As I mentioned, if you're used to, say, using Bootstrap that has that grid layout, that's not there available for you. So people do often use the Angular flex layout package as a accompaniment instead, but it is a whole nother thing that you need to learn and look at. So looking at a few other component libraries that are out there, Bootstrap we mentioned is the most popular one, but it does come with jQuery, which creates a lot of overhead, so I personally like to try and avoid it because of that. PrimeNG I have used a bit, and I've seen that it's pretty good. It has a really good amount of components there, but it also doesn't have that responsive layout built in, and I've had some problems with accessibility when I've been using it. Kendo UI I haven't actually used myself, but I have some teammates who have, and they really enjoyed it, but it's not open source, so you do need a license for it. If you work for a big organization, that might not be a problem, so maybe that could be one for you to check out. So now we have heard how Angular material can be used in large organizations across several applications where brand is important. We have seen how to set it up and use it in our small apps and side projects as well. And we've had a look at some of the pros and cons and comparison to other applications. But mostly I feel we have seen how Angular material is easy, breezy, and beautiful. The only question left is Angular material right for you? So thank you. If you scan that QR code on the screen, it will link you to all of my slides and different resources that I used in the talk today. So thank you, everyone.